asking questions, I think, is an incredibly powerful way to get other people to engage with us, to actually start a conversation, as opposed to just giving our answers. And there's one kind of question that turns out to work better than any other if you wanted to influence someone. A couple years ago, I had a student named Annie. She was studying at the University of Michigan, and her plant at her chemical firm closed, and she couldn't continue studying for her degree. She was offered a transfer to Connecticut, but she had no way of flying back across the country. And she was trying to figure out what to do. She was taking my negotiation class. And I gave her a little bit of advice. And I said, look, you might want to think about basically getting a lot of outside offers and making sure that you had strong options. And then maybe you'll get some kind of opportunity to be able to keep your degree going and keep a job. But she didn't do that. She had a much better idea. Instead, she ended up going in and spent a few minutes talking to one of her managers. And then a few weeks later, she was offered a seat on the company's private jet for free, where she could fly across the country twice a week until she finished her degree. She also was offered a free rental car, and in case the jet was not available any day, paid for flights by the company. And she did this for 9 months, riding across the country twice a week. How did she do it? Well, instead of going into her HR manager with powerful communication, here are my alternatives, here's why you should keep me on board and make this happen, she opened herself up to be a little bit more vulnerable. And she said, you know what, I'm really in a bind. I would love your advice. I'm trying to finish my degree at Michigan. I need some way of getting there if I'm going to move out to Connecticut. What would you do if you were in my shoes? At which point, the HR manager said, well, let me see if I can make some calls. Ended up reaching out to a few members of the executive team, one of whom knew that the private jet went back and forth 2 days a week and always had some empty seats, and then was able to open it up at very low cost. Why did this happen? There's research by Katie Lillianquist, which shows that when you ask someone for advice, 3 things tend to happen. The first one is you flatter them. To paraphrase Benjamin Franklin, we all admire the wisdom of people who come to us for advice. Because they have really good taste, right? But that happens, right? The moment somebody asks you for advice, you're like, wow, this person thought I had a lot of wisdom. How cool. And then the second thing that happens is, in order to give that person advice, you have to make a recommendation to having walked in their shoes. You have to look at the dilemma or the problem or the situation from their perspective. And once you've walked in their shoes, you tend to identify a little bit more. You will empathize a little bit more. And you put those 2 things together. The person's just flattered you, and you kind of understand their position. At that point, if there's any way you can help them, you're much more likely to step up and say, yeah, you know what, I want to do something to support this person in any way I can. And then if that person was an adversary, they may, as Katie puts it, actually become an advocate. And that's exactly what had happened for Annie. And I think advice seeking is an incredibly powerful way of actually influencing others, despite the fact that it's admitting that you don't have all the answers, that you don't know what to do, that you need and depend on the recommendations and wisdom of other people. So I think there's tremendous